Hello, Salt Lake City. Welcome to Talk with Ted, a show about nothing, number 22. My name is Ted McBride. I'm an attorney here in Salt Lake City, a transplanted New Yorker. A shout out to my high school friends and family and cousins and acquaintances back home. I got a few people that tune in a little bit regularly. It's kind of fun to keep in touch with them over the airways. Special shout out to my step cousin Ralph Perfetto, a former New York City police officer who now lives in Florida and has always driven a hot rod, and I bought a hot rod and I shared a picture of it with Ralph, who greatly appreciated it. So hello to Ralph. I've got a good show lined up today. No guest in the studio yet, but I expect to have a caller in a couple of minutes, Troy Brewer from the Salt Lake City Stars, and that's the Utah Jazz G League affiliate. Sort of the minor leagues for the Jazz, and Troy is a account executive with the Stars, and we're going to talk a little bit of NCAA basketball. There was a great game last night. Congratulations to the Virginia Cavaliers, who won just a terrific game, an overtime game. I hope some people saw that. Brings back memories of the greatest college basketball game ever and the most watched game ever. Took place right here in Salt Lake City in 1979, and I watched it from my living room in New York. And was heartbroken when Magic Johnson beat my idol Larry Bird, Michigan State versus Indiana State in 1979. And that still ranks as the highest rated, most viewed college basketball game ever. And it's now 40 years ago that great game took place. It had 35.1 million viewers, and it's still a significant lead on any other game that's ever been played. And hopefully last night's game got some good attention, because it was really a thriller, and it looked like Virginia was going down and hit a great three-pointer at the end of regulation with about 20 seconds to go to tie it up, and then handled it in overtime. So I always love watching the NCAA tournament. I believe it's one of the great sporting events that we've got. And I really love this time of year because now, right on the heels of the NCAA tournament, we've got the Masters. And if we've got any golf fans out there, Utah golf fans, we've got local homegrown champion, currently ranked 15th in the world, is Tony Finau. And you may recall Tony Finau last year severely sprained his ankle going into the Masters. There was some question whether he would play. He did end up playing. He had a string of birdies on Sunday on the back nine. I think he had 6 of them in a row to finish in 10th place. And I was saying at that time, I think it's a preview of things to come. So hopefully we'll see Tony Finau with a string of birdies on Sunday to put on that green jacket that I think would fit him so well. And Tony honors his mother when he plays every Sunday, and he wears a green shirt in honor of his mother, who passed away in a tragic car accident back in 2011 or 2012. And so he's already wearing a green shirt. It should match nicely with the green jacket, and I'll be pulling for our Utah golf god, Tony Finau, this week. After Troy joins us for a segment or two, and he should be calling in any minute now. I asked him to call in about 10 after. I'm going to have on Utah State Senator Todd Weiler. And Todd is a contemporary of mine who's an extraordinary lawyer. He just took a job at a new law firm, Christensen & Jensen, some of the best lawyers in town, right downtown Salt Lake City. I'm going to ask him about how that's going and his new... Is my volume loud enough, Alan? Up there? Okay. We'll see how Senator Wheeler's new job is going, and as well as learn about the details of the lawmaking process here in Utah. We're having a little technical trouble here on my microphone, so hang on one second. You want me to switch there? Hopefully that one's a little better. Not sure if it is. I'll try to speak up. We're having a few technical problems. Got to get a little closer to the mic. But Senator Wheeler's going to join us, and he is in the newspaper all the time. It was real easy for me to prepare for this show. Just put in Todd Wheeler news, and just one story after the other came up, including stories about concerns about the number of prisoners dying in Utah prisons. I think last year there were 24 of them that died in Utah prisons. He's got legislation and a big push toward a Clean Air Act here in Utah. We're all too familiar with the smog we suffer from here on those winter days when the snow's on the ground and we get that inversion. It wasn't too bad this year, but, we've got an air quality problem here in Utah. I'm going to talk to Senator Weiler about that, as well as some other interesting things that he's been involved in. And we're going to learn about him and what it takes to be a politician, raising money, running for office, expectations of constituents, and of course some battles up on the Hill. I'm sure Todd's been involved in a bunch of them. I'm originally from a little town called Goshen, New York. It's about an hour north of New York City in Orange County, New York, about 20 miles from West Point. And I went to basketball camp at West Point a few times back when, just after Bobby Knight was the coach there at Army before he went on to Indiana. And, of course, the great Bill Parcells also coached at Army, the football coach, before he went on to take over the Giants. But I had some great experiences at basketball camp at West Point, and as well as a lot of history. There's a lot of Revolutionary War history there. And if you've never been to West Point, it's a place worth traveling to. It's about 40 miles north of New York City on a little bend in the Hudson River. And that's where George Washington placed that great chain across the river. And there's still pieces of the chain there on display to stop the British Navy from going up the river. And that was a brilliant move and a decisive move in the success of the Revolutionary War. And so New York's got a lot of great history back there. And we've got a lot of great history here in Utah. And I've been traveling down Parley's Canyon for the better of 20 years, and I'm always amazed at the efforts that were taken to carve that road. It was originally the old Lincoln Highway. It was an old railroad that went through there years ago, which is amazing. Now, of course, it's Route 80, and that'll take you right across into New York City, across the George Washington Bridge that my dear grandfather walked across the day it opened, I think in 1929 or 1930. But there's great history there in Parley's Canyon, including some history about the Donner Party. We're all familiar with the Donner Party that got stranded in the Sierra Nevada trying to get to California, and many of them perished, and they were stuck there with an extraordinary winter. But they came right down here through Utah, and they were on the California Trail originally, going up through Wyoming. And they were persuaded by a gentleman whose name I've got to look up again here. Lanford Hastings. Lanford Hastings published a book in 1845, The Emigrant's Guide to Oregon and California, and perhaps one of the worst publications in the history of mankind, because he convinced George Donner and part of that Donner Party to come down through Utah and as a shortcut to California. And they came over Big Mountain Pass, which is up there at the top of Parley's Canyon, or at the top of East Canyon. And they came down there, and they came down into Parley's Canyon and got turned around, but because it was so rugged, they couldn't get through it. They couldn't get their wagons through Parley's Canyon. And the next time you drive through there, look around at those rock formations toward the mouth of the canyon, and just the extraordinary effort that had to be taken to get the highway in there. And imagine what it was like back in the 1850s. It must have been quite difficult, to say the least. Well, the Donner Party got turned around, and they went back up East Canyon a bit to Immigration Canyon, which is just north of Parley's Canyon. And it took them about 10 days to hack their way down through Immigration Canyon. And so they got slowed down by 10 days or 2 weeks here in Utah. Stumbled out past the Great Salt Lake and met the Salt Flats, which is just one of the most barren places on earth, which is where many of their animals died. And you can imagine what a difficult trek that was back at that time. And the Brigham Young came through about a year later, and he made it from the top of Big Mountain Pass down through Immigration Canyon in one single day, after it had taken the Donner Party 10 to 14 days to carve that trail and get through the same area. So the Mormon pioneers were grateful that that trail had been blazed a bit before they got here, and they were maybe wise enough to stop when they got out of the canyon to where was now Heritage Park, where Brigham Young declared very famously that this is the place. And this continues to be the place. as we all know too well. We were lucky to have Utah host the 2002 Olympics, which was just an amazing event for the world to play in our wonderful mountains and experience our wonderful culture. And we know that those Olympics now will be returning in 2028 or 2032. So it'll be great to have the world back. And it's going to be a very different Utah than what folks experienced in 2002 because the place is changing dramatically. I said before on this radio program, when I moved to Utah in 1997, the population was 2 million, and now it's 3 million. And we've got Silicon Slopes and industry just blossoming out here. We've got a new airport going in. We've got skyscrapers going up. There's cranes in the sky everywhere you look, as well as a bit of a housing crisis. They can't build the houses fast enough to accommodate the people that are moving here. But we're going to do our best to keep up that great growth and to continue to make this a wonderful and welcome place for the world. And it'll be a thrill to host the world again in 2000, at the next Olympics, I should say. I guess they don't know when it will be. Alan, do me a favor. Would you call Troy, make sure he's getting through okay? I expected Troy Brewer to call in by now, so we might have more technical problems. But if you've heard my show before, you know that I'm not very technically savvy. I've got my sound man, Alan Anderson, here trying to help me out, because if I were left to my own devices, there'd probably be no radio show at all. And Alan, I texted him the private call-in number there, but maybe give Troy the regular call-in number too. On last week's show, I had a great show last week, and I had Troy Rawlings, Davis County prosecutor Troy Rawlings on, and Troy prosecuted our former Attorney General Mark Shurtleff. Mark served from 2000 to 2014 and then faced 8 felony counts, he served until 2012, and then he faced 8 felony counts in 2014, and those charges were ultimately dismissed in 2016. And Troy had some amazing details to tell us about the FBI and the FBI's control and the Department of Justice's control over a state criminal case. And if you didn't hear that show, it's available on the K-Talk website. It's also available on my LinkedIn page, as well as my Facebook page, but it's definitely a show that's worth listening to. And many people know that I represent Mark in a civil rights case against the FBI, among others, and we're doing our part to help restore Mark's reputation, because the poor man was really quite vilified by the press, and very unjustly so, because all of those allegations were against him were not true. And we're determined to seek justice for Mark, get his reputation square, so that we can restore him to where he belongs. And that's a real Utah statesman. Mark is a great guy, a wonderful leader, great politician, great lawyer, great man, great father, great grandfather, and I don't mean great-grandfather. But Mark's a terrific guy, and if you didn't hear that show, you should go back and listen to that one. But I think we've got Troy on. Do we have him?
Hey, I'm here.
Troy Brewer, how are you?
I'm doing good. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for the invite.
I'm a huge jazz fan, and
Good.
And you know what? I got you coming right up onto the break, Troy, so I'm going to have you hold on for just a couple of minutes, and we're going to come back and learn a little bit about you and what you do for the organization, all right?
Okay.
Stick with us. Thanks, man. Welcome back to Talk with Ted. My name is Ted McBride. I'm a civil rights personal injury lawyer here in Salt Lake City. You can find me on the internet at tedmcbridelaw.com. And I've got with me on the phone Troy Brewer. How are you, Troy?
Hey, Ted. How's it going, man?
Good. Thanks again for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, you know, I'm a huge jazz fan, and I told you I want to promote the Jazz, and we got the playoffs coming up, don't we?
Yes, we do. And actually, we got to take it day by day, though. So we have a big game tonight against the Nuggets. So that's a big one.
That's a home game, too, I think, right? Is that the last home game?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
I went to the one I've been to a couple of them lately. I saw a great game week and a half ago against the Wizards where it was a real close game. Donovan Mitchell lit him up for 35.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw the Sacramento Kings just this past Friday, but it was a bit of a blowout.
Yes, yes.
But that Grayson Allen had a great game. Did you see that one?
I did, yes. He's definitely stepped up a lot. I think we can contribute a lot of that just to his experience in the G League. The G League, the Salt Lake City Stars, helps kind of keep guys ready so they don't kind of wither away while they're waiting to get into the Jazz games. So I think he just was patient and waited for his opportunity and was able to take advantage of it.
Boy, it looked that way the other night. He was sensational. He scored 17 points in about 6 minutes.
Yeah, no, he's a great talent. I mean, even at Duke, you can see glimpses of his greatness. But even if you watch some of his games in the G League, he always played in his element, played under control, and did what he knows how to do. And I just think that built up his confidence to have a performance like he did the other day.
Yeah, it was great to see, and the crowd really supported him because, of course, he was our #1 pick last year.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Hey, Troy, tell our audience who are you and what do you do with the Stars?
Okay, so my name's Troy Brewer. I work in our front office for the Stars, the official minor league team for the Utah Jazz. My goal, or I should say my focus more so, is in our sales department, bringing in revenue for the organization and helping with marketing and things like that. But prior to coming to Salt Lake City, I played professional basketball for about 5 years, overseas, internationally, all around the world, to be honest. I played
in Hungary? Denmark?
Hungary, so Budapest, Copenhagen, Portugal, Canada, G League and training camp with the New York Knicks affiliate.
Was Jimmer there when you were there?
Yeah, so he was there with me. Quite a few notable guys from the Knicks organization were there as well. So I was there with him. So I knew a little bit about him as well. Great player, great personality, and I'm glad that he has the opportunity in Phoenix for the remainder of this season and into next year.
He's no spring chicken anymore either, is he, Troy? He's 30, I think.
Yeah, he's been around for a while, but the thing is, he still brings value. He still can play, he still can contribute. So I personally wish the best for him, and I think he'll be able to show what he can do.
So tell our listeners then about the G League. I think you guys play at Salt Lake Community College. Is that right?
Yes. So the team plays at Salt Lake Community College down in Taylorsville. However, there's like 3 games that are actually played at Vivint Arena. We just schedule those so they don't conflict with the Jazz schedule. Okay. But they play down at Salt Lake Community College. So if you've been to that campus, you would know that it's pretty much like a very much intimate setting. It's not as big or as pretty as Vivint, but we have all the bounce houses, face painting, balloons. So it's similar to like a bees game, almost like the minor league feel.
Yeah.
But right over at Salt Lake Community College. But we actually had a great season this year. The team made it to the playoffs for the first time in our franchise history. They actually had a very, very, very successful season in my opinion. Did you ever get to check out any games or anything like that?
I didn't, but next year for certain.
Okay. Well,
by the time I pulled up the schedule, the season was over.
Oh, okay. Yeah. They lost a tough one in the playoffs to OKC's minor league team, and so that would have helped them advance further on. And so the G League finals are still going on right now, and those 2 teams are the Long Island Nets, which is the Brooklyn Nets affiliate, and the Rio Grande Vipers, the Houston Rockets affiliate. So they're playing the best of 3 right now.
Oh, cool. Hey, does every NBA team have a G League team?
So far, 28 of the 30 teams have an affiliate. So the only 2 teams that don't are the Denver Nuggets and the Portland Trail Blazers. But within the next year or so, every team will have a 1-to-1 match. And
is that pretty much where the players are pulled up from for the most part?
For the most part, you have like 2-way contracts and guys that get 10-day contracts, and they pull from their affiliate team. Of course, you have free agents and things like that, which helps play a role in where guys land. But the best way to kind of visualize the G League is kind of like a JV and varsity concept. So guys that are on that border, on that cusp, they get the opportunity to get called up. And unfortunately, in the game of basketball, you always have injuries and guys getting traded and things like that. So it's definitely utilized in a good way, just because it's the same plays, the same calls, the same basically structure that the NBA team is running, the G League does. So there's no skip in performance when those guys get called up and step into playing. And same for Summer League as well.
And I didn't realize that Grayson Allen was down in the G League.
Yeah. He played majority of his time with us with the Stars, which I said, that contributed a lot to his confidence, I think, just being ready. Because if it wasn't for the G League and he just sat on the bench for the Jazz, that doesn't really do him any good at all, when it's time for him to actually perform.
Yeah, sitting on the bench can be tough.
Yeah, I've lived that a few times, so I know how that goes.
Not in your young career, you didn't. You went to one of the powerhouse high schools in Maryland.
Yes, Montrose Christian.
And that same high school, I think Kevin Durant spent a little time there, didn't he?
He did, yes. Kevin Durant, he played there. He was my teammate there.
You and Kevin Durant on the same team in high school?
Yes, I was a junior. He was a senior on that team. We were the number one team in the country, and we ended up beating Oak Hill that year, which is another perennial powerhouse. And they had Michael Beasley, Tywan Lawson, Nolan Smith, a lot of big-time players on that team.
Are they in Chicago?
Virginia, Mount Wilson, Virginia.
Okay.
So Southern Virginia near the Tennessee border.
Yeah. When I was, I'm a little ahead of your time. I was playing in the early 80s, and I remember Dunbar High School. They dominated.
Oh, absolutely.
They dominated. In fact, they had 5 guys that made it to the NBA. Muggsy Bogues.
Yes.
Muggsy Bogues, Reggie Williams, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Baltimore itself is known for producing big-time basketball players. So Dunbar, and then even a lot of schools in the D.C. area itself, in the city, produce a lot of big-time players. But on that Montrose team, a lot of guys have come through there as well, like Terrence Ross from I want to say he's on the Magic now, or maybe the Raptors. But Terrence Ross, he won the dunk contest. He came through Montrose. Justin Anderson, who was he's on the Atlanta Hawks now, he came through Montrose. Even back in the day with Linus Kleza, who played with the Raptors and the Denver Nuggets, he played at Montrose.
Okay.
So it's quite a few guys that have been through there, and even one of our reserves now, Naz Mitrou-Long, he spent a year at Montrose before transferring, before going to Iowa State. So
now how does that happen, where you guys go to these amazing high schools? Did you grow up right there, or did you move there to go to that school? How did that work?
So I grew up in that area. It was a little bit of commute to get to that school, but I'm from that area. And actually, when you brought up the Washington Wizards, one of the assistant coaches on that team was our coach at Montrose.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So his name is David Atkins. So he kind of got us all together and helped develop us into the players that we were to become Division I players and professionals. But yeah, a lot of those guys came from Baltimore, D.C. area. A couple of out-of-state guys. But all the schools would recruit, similar to college, and just you have international players and things like that, and that's kind of like format for a lot of things that go on now in high school basketball.
What about where Donovan Mitchell went up in New Hampshire? Because he's a New York kid, right?
Yeah, Connecticut, New York. I want to say, I could be wrong, but I think it was Connecticut.
Okay.
But yeah, those similar schools, just like that. Play there, build up your recruiting, get your scholarships, and then go on. And so, of course, at Louisville, he was able to make an impact and then become a draft pick. So, if you do it the right way, it definitely works out.
That's amazing. Hey, we may have a mutual acquaintance. Do you know Indiana Pacers assistant coach Bill Bano?
I know the name very, very much, but I do not personally know him.
He's been working with Nate McMullen, head coach Nate McMullen, for 15 years or so.
Okay. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I'm familiar.
Yep. He was a UMass guy. He was my mentor growing up. I went to 5-star basketball camp 4 times, Troy.
Oh, I've been there too. I know about 5-star. Did you go to the one in Virginia?
I went to Honesdale, the original one, in the Poconos, and then I did 1 year out in Pittsburgh at Robert Morris College.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I could still drop some names. Delray Brooks.
Yes.
Danny Ferry. I covered Ramil Robinson. He destroyed me.
What position did you play?
I was a point guard. But I wasn't fast enough. And, I played in that NBA league my last time there. There were 150 kids. I was either 149th or 150th. But I loved the game. I love basketball. So who is your boss? Are you employed by Gail Miller, the great Gail Miller?
Yes, we are all under Larry H. Miller, so we're under that umbrella. Technically the Jazz, like I said, is just a minor league team, but we're all located in the same place. So our office is at the Jazz practice facility. So that's our organization.
Yeah, and you and I had communicated on LinkedIn about the Russell Westbrook incident here with the Utah fan that had the nasty words for him, and Russell's bit of a visceral response. And Gail Miller came out and gave a great speech the following game, and I've been to a couple of games since, and it seems like the Utah crowd is pretty well behaved. What's your thoughts or experience with all of that?
Well, I'm very happy and proud of how she handled the situation and stepped up, just kind of setting the tone. And hopefully other NBA leaders will be able to follow in her steps and make it known that it's a zero tolerance policy. Just because to me it's completely unacceptable. I wasn't there at that specific game when it happened, but I've definitely in my days just have heard and seen and been around people like that. And in my opinion, like I said, it should be zero tolerance policy because it's a big issue that's going on, and a lot of people don't want to talk about it. But I don't think it's right for fans to just feel like because they paid some money that these players are subject to whatever they feel that they deserve to say to them. It's not a zoo, these are human beings. So, and more importantly, if you're not going to say it to a player when he's out in public or not wearing a Jazz jersey or whatever NBA jersey, then don't say it just because you feel comfortable in that environment. I think it's unacceptable, period.
Have you witnessed any of that similar conduct at the Stars games?
No. I mean, of course, we have hecklers and people that want to heckle and get under people's skin, but nothing along the lines of what was recorded or heard at that OKC game.
And do you know if any of the other teams in the NBA are doing things similar to what the Jazz are doing with those public service announcements and trying to get the fans to sort of monitor one another and call out disruptive people?
Not to the degree of what the Jazz has done. I've heard incidents. I heard there was an incident in Boston not too long ago. I honestly don't know exactly how the Boston management handled it, but I think it's on people's radar, and I think more and more players are starting to speak up. Even Kyle Korver put out a nice article yesterday, speaking up about what his opinion and his perspective about it. So I think once players continue to speak up more and use their platform as a resource for others to learn about what's really going on, I think change will happen. But I'm actually glad it did happen because now it brings it to people's attention, and it's not something you can just continue to sweep under the rug.
And were the Jazz doing those public service announcements all year, or did this incident have some effect on that?
I think this incident had an effect on it. It made them just buckle down more and call out things that is unacceptable. But I've been to plenty of Jazz games, and I've been to actually plenty of NBA games in general. And the crowd at Jazz games, of course, they're very active and passionate. But compared to other places, I've from my first experience, I actually enjoyed the games and never really felt like I was experiencing things. But of course, you have those in any places. So just because I didn't hear it doesn't mean it didn't happen. But I think I'm glad that it did happen here. I'm glad that it brought it to people's attention because whether I hear it or not, or you go to a game and you hear it or not, it still exists everywhere. And it needs to be brought up, and people need to be called out and held accountable. And that's how change happens.
Yeah, that's great. Because I tell you, the players don't deserve it. It's a tough job being a professional athlete, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, even collegiately, guys have to hold their tongue and do what coach says. And I mean, I remember the situation with Marcus Smart when he was at Oklahoma State. A fan said something to him when he was going for a loose ball in the crowd, and supposedly the fan had said something inappropriate to him. And then I don't know exactly what measures Oklahoma State took, but that's a college kid in his early 20s being heckled by a grown man and his wife or whatever the situation was. And why does he have to go through that just because the fan feels entitled or privileged to say something like that? I think is unacceptable.
Now, I had called Karl Malone back in the old days. I called him the paper boy a couple of times instead of the mailman.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think I was crossing the line. Is that cool to call him the paper boy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see an issue in that, especially because your tone doesn't sound like you're trying to imply something.
No, I have great fun. I'm a little bit of a heckler. I had Kenny Anderson blow me a kiss one day, guarding John Stockton. I like to grill him, give him a little hard time, get him motivated too. We want to see these guys with energy to put on a show, right?
Definitely. I mean, I think some guys live off of that as well, just, kind of going back and forth to the crowd. I think there was a game, maybe it was the Pistons, a fan said something to Donovan, and he was pointing at the fan saying, you did this, this is the reason why I just, kicked your team's butt, basically. But I think there's always a way to go about getting fans involved, and I think fans should want to be involved, but when it crosses the line and it becomes more personal and blatant of what a fan is doing, and then if you see that a fan has a history of this and that, I think it puts other people on notice, because now they have to be more careful of what they think and how they act, and hopefully it forces them to change their ways and become a better human being, which will make the world better.
Yeah, I agree. And I tell you, you could feel it in the arena. You could feel the people kind of paying attention to what other people were saying. So I think it's great to see, because we love the Jazz. Of course, it's our only major league sport here in town, and we got to keep them here, and we got to honor these great players that come and play for us.
Absolutely, 100%. I agree with you on that.
Hey, Troy, thank you so much for joining me. Alan, turn that down 1 second. Last question. How far are the Jazz going to go in the playoffs this year?
I think that they're going to go as far as they want to go, and I think they want to go all the way.
I think they can win it. I think they're an extraordinary team. And, if the ball bounces the right way, I think they can beat anybody.
I agree.
Hey, maybe I'll follow up with you. Maybe the two of us can catch one playoff game together. And go Jazz. And, Troy, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Sounds good. Thank you, Todd.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
I'll be right back with Utah State Senator Todd Weiler. Welcome back to Talk with Ted. My name's Ted McBride. I'm a transplanted New Yorker here in Utah for 22 years now, and don't plan on going anywhere anytime soon. And I've been having fun with this radio program for the past 4 or 5 months. We've had some great shows. And now my guest for today, Senator Todd Weiler, is late. I think there's some traffic out there. It's raining. The weather's pretty bad. The roads are pretty bad. Yesterday, there were some traffic jams across town because there was a gunman on the street that I think our local police was able to apprehend fairly quickly, but you never know what's going to happen in a big city like Salt Lake City. And it's raining out. It's about 43 degrees. The ground is saturated. The rivers are running, and there's a mountain of snow up there still. I know that Snowbird expects to be open until July this year. They got 48 feet of snow this year. 48 feet, 600 inches of snow. So if you had the opportunity to vacation in Utah, or if you still got your skis, you haven't put them away yet, don't put them away, because there's still plenty of skiing to go. So I'm going to try to fill a little bit of dead air before Todd gets here. Maybe we'll even take a call. I'm going to give out the number, see if anybody wants to chat about anything. You can reach us at 801-254-1640. Feel free to give a buzz if you want to talk basketball, last night's great NCAA championship game, or anything else you'd like to discuss. And I've got great memories. I watched the game up at Alan's house last night with the family. We had a great time. But I've got just great memories of the NCAA tournament, going back to that game that I mentioned, the Magic Johnson, Larry Bird battle at the Huntsman Center in 1979. Of course, we had Thurl Bailey won the national championship in 1983 on that great last-second alley-oop. The team with Casey Wittenberg. My heart was broken in 1985 when Patrick Ewing's Georgetown Hoyas got beat by the Villanova Wildcats, and they kind of cheated. That was with Ed Pickney. That was before the shot clock. And they figured out a way to beat Patrick Ewing, and that was just don't shoot. And they just passed the ball around and around and around and beat the great Patrick Ewing. In 1989, Ramil Robinson from Michigan State, who you heard me a little while ago, I covered this kid when we were at basketball camp together. He destroyed me. He was truly amazing. And he hit 2 great foul shots with a second to go to beat Seton Hall. Who can forget the 1990, I think it was a year later, the Christian Laettner basket where might have been Grant Hill that passed the ball 3/4 of the length of the court, and Christian did a little fake and fade away and hit that 17-footer to win it. That was truly amazing. So there's great memories, and I'm sure that many of the kids that were watching that game last night will remember it for their entire lives, because Virginia really pulled off a couple of miracles to keep the tournament going in some earlier games, and then they pulled off that miracle shot. I got to call you out, Alan. So I'm watching the game with Alan. Texas Tech has got a 3-point lead, and there's 20 seconds to go. They're down 3, and the kid dribbles in and he kicks it out to the 3-point to the guy who had the 3-point shot, whose name escapes me right now. And Alan says, "Oh, terrible pass," and boom, the kid hit it and tied the game. So I said, well, that's why Alan Anderson is not a college basketball coach.
Yep, I was wrong.
You were wrong. But you and I had a little bit of fun today.
That was fun.
Today I'm talking about.
Yeah, we did.
I represent Alan in connection with a federal civil rights lawsuit, a Fair Housing Act lawsuit against Sandy City. We're also suing the state of Utah, Draper City, West Valley, West Jordan, and Riverdale. But we filed a motion for a preliminary injunction today to get permission to operate sober living homes.
That's right.
And we'd spoken about the sober living homes in the past. Alan, give the listeners just a brief description. What is a sober living home?
A sober living home is a regular home in a family neighborhood where
Talk into the mic a little bit.
where individuals who are in recovery from alcohol or drug addiction, where they live in a peer support environment so that they can have others around them.
Get a little closer to the mic, Alan.
That's as good as we got.
Closer to the mic, you. Yeah.
Okay.
How long have you been doing that?
So we've been doing sober living homes for about 10 years now.
And how does it work? Are these your homes?
No, we actually lease the homes from various owners.
So you sign on to lease the home?
We do. We lease. I come in as kind of the point of stability to and use my reputation and put my reputation on the line that the house will work.
And now the residents that sign up to come there, do they need to sign a year lease?
They don't sign a lease.
They don't sign a lease?
They don't.
And what's the benefit to that?
That's a good question. The benefit is that they comply with the rules. So they sign house rules and guidelines, and those are established, which require everyone in the house to remain completely sober and to go to outside support meetings, stay active in their recovery, and the way people are brought into the home is the residents that are already there, they vote them in to the home and accept them as a family member. And if they violate the rules, then the house members also have the ability to vote them out.
And if they get voted out, how quickly must they leave?
It's immediate, and that's why we do not do leases. If someone relapses or is disruptive, it's important to have them leave the home immediately so that it doesn't affect the other family members.
You said you've been doing it about 10 years?
Yes.
How in your view, is it a successful model?
It is. It's a successful model. As you know, if the cities and the community leaders will cooperate with us.
Hang on, we're going to get there.
Okay.
But just is it a successful model? Do you see people that?
Yeah.
Do you have people that are coming out of prison?
We do.
Are all of them coming out of prison?
No, not all of them come out of prison.
Do you have housewives?
Housewives?
I'm saying, well, let me put it this way. Do you have people from all walks of life?
Yes, we do. Yes.
No, I don't mean a housewife at the place. I mean, I'm talking about the attendees.
Yes. Yeah, we have people from all walks of life. We have people who are on probation with the court. We have other people who have been through rehab and they're now ready to move on with life. And we have others who just want to live in an environment where they're where the others around them are not using drugs or alcohol.
Now, about a year and a half ago, Sandy City passed some new municipal laws requiring a business license
Right.
and a process to request reasonable accommodation, sort of a variance, so to speak, from zoning laws.
That's right.
Because many of the municipalities have zoning laws that say you can't have more than 8 unrelated people living in a home together.
Yes.
Okay. And after that municipal ordinance was passed, did you make application for reasonable accommodations on your homes?
We did. We had several homes.
How many?
In Sandy, we had 7.
Okay.
And
you filed that application, I want to say, the fall of 2017?
I think we initially made application back in 2016.
And they put you on hold, saying they needed to change
Right.
the law.
Yeah, so they put me on hold, then they went about changing the law, and then they asked for new applications, which we submitted again. And
And what's the status of those applications, Alan?
I think they're sitting in their archives. We haven't had any response from the city on
Has
those.
there been any action whatsoever, to your knowledge, on those applications that you made in Sandy City?
No,
You've gotten no response from them?
they've not responded.
And you've asked for this reasonable accommodation?
We have.
You've given a description of the type of home you're operating?
That's correct.
How does AP&P factor into it, adult probation and parole?
So those who are on probation through the courts, or they may be coming out of jail or prison, they need to have their housing situation approved through adult probation and parole, maybe drug court or other agencies. And in order to do that, we communicate with the AP&P official, and they verify that there's an opening at the house, that it's available, and that they've been accepted into the house. And then we make certain representations to adult probation officers that they have.
Have you had any problems in getting those referrals to come because this Sandy City hasn't acted on your applications?
That's right. Yes.
Just describe that for us.
So what's been happening is adult probation and parole out at Draper, they will call and verify there's housing for a certain individual that is incarcerated, that is leaving or is eligible to leave. We will give them that approval, and the individual gets ready. They release him. He gets ready to move into the house. And in some cases, they actually do move into the house. And once they report back, what's been happening is once they report back to AP&P at the Salt Lake County level, they will deny them, and they will tell them to leave our home because Sandy City has not given a license or approval to be there.
So you've actually got then people that get it initially approved, come in, and then have to leave?
That's right.
Then where are they going to go?
In almost all cases, with the exception of 1 or 2, they all end up going to the homeless shelter. Adult probation and parole actually tells their clients or probationers to go to the homeless shelter and live there.
Incredible.
Amazing. It's tragic.
You also have the homes are close to public transportation,
That's right.
close to economic opportunities, jobs, etc.
Yes, and that's why Sandy's a great place. Is as we know, Trax runs right through Sandy, and public transportation is essential, and so is proximity to good jobs, because these folks work. That's why they're there. They want to get back into the mainstream of society.
Now, you said a couple minutes ago you had 6 homes you made applications on.
That's right.
How many homes do you have now?
We're down to 1.
Down to 1?
1 home in Sandy.
And what do you attribute to the cause of that shrinkage from 6 to 1?
The only factor in that has caused us to have to close the homes has been from the disruption from Sandy City officials and law enforcement.
You say law enforcement. You actually have been contacted by the police, correct?
That's right.
Now, today you and I filed in the federal district court a renewed motion for a preliminary injunction.
Yes, we did.
And we're asking the federal district court to enjoin Sandy City from enforcing those laws that they put on the book. And it's those laws that you put the application into the city planning commission, trying to comply with those laws, right?
That's right.
And nothing has happened with those applications. Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
And so we're now asking the federal court to say that they can't enforce those provisions, and you should be able to operate your homes.
Yes.
But you've already lost 5 of them.
That's right.
How many people do you think have been affected, have had housing rights deprived as a result of that inaction by Sandy City to make any decision on those applications?
Considering the last, only taking into account the last 2 years, well over 200 or 300 individuals, perhaps even 500 people have gone homeless because of that.
And what about you? How has it affected you?
Well, it's destroyed my life financially.
Because you were on these leases and then couldn't get the people.
That's right.
To fill the homes.
Yes. And I, it was my neck on the line. In order to get the homes open, it had to be that way. I personally invested a lot of money and a lot of time in getting these homes open and operating.
And you've now been evicted from them.
That's right. We've been evicted.
Stay tuned for updates on our efforts against Sandy City, and hopefully we can generate a little public support because it's motivated by a lot of prejudices out there on the street. These are people that need help, need homes, and we'll have more on that coming up. Hopefully I'll be right back with Senator Weiler. Welcome back to Talk with Ted, number 22. Todd Weiler, Utah State Senator Todd Weiler. He showed up here just in time because we were about to just go into some dead air or me rambling on about more basketball or a whole lot of nothing. Introduce yourself for us, Todd.
Yeah, it's Todd Weiler. It's
Weiler,
a
I'm
weird
sorry.
German name, but I'm a resident of Woods Cross, Utah. I've been a state senator for just over 7 years. I make my living by being a lawyer. Because the legislature pays, but doesn't pay very well. It's a part-time job with part-time pay. I mean, it pays well for a part-time job, I'll be honest. I'm also an adjunct law professor at BYU Law School. It's my 6th semester. I just teach one class a semester. And
What do you teach?
I teach a class. I do a workshop on legislative policy and bill drafting, which has been kind of fun. And
Do you draft the bills yourself?
No, I mean I could, but they still have to go through we call the Office of Legislative Research and General Counsel. So we've got almost 20 attorneys that work for the legislators, and then another 20 or 30 policy analysts, and they draft the bills. So.
I often wonder how that occurs because I read these statutes. I work with many of them, and I think, boy, I could never write these.
Yeah. So we usually just kind of go. Even though I'm a lawyer, I mean, if I drafted a bill, they would rewrite it, but. We kind of go in with them saying, "Hey, I'd like to make this change. I have this idea that and then they come up with a draft, and then we approve it or work with it. Usually,
It's hard writing laws, isn't it?
Yeah. A lot of times we'll have someone will come to us, a special interest, and so they'll have some input on it as well. But I mean, ultimately. We run the bill, but they draft it, and then sometimes they'll have technical changes, like they'll decide, instead of using which, we want to use that, or instead of using that, we want to. So they start changing everything.
What about and or?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's exactly.
Right.
So I mean, sometimes if you change an or to an and, you change the whole statute.
I say that because
yeah.
I raised my hand in law school. I thought I had the answer.
Oh,
I raised
okay.
my hand and I didn't see that it was and not or. So I'll never forget that. 30 years later, I'm still suffering with that public mistake.
The Socratic method, is not kind.
Scary stuff,
So,
right?
Yeah, for sure.
Now you're. I was particularly interested in having you on because you and I started our careers about the same time.
Okay.
You're probably about 50.
I'm 51.
51.
Yeah.
I'm 52.
Yeah, there you go. I'll be 52 next month. So.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you.
I turned last month.
Star Wars Day. So it was my
and
birthday.
we had something many years ago. I can't even remember what it was, but I see you in the paper all the time.
Okay.
All the time.
Yeah.
Tell us what interesting stuff are you working on right now?
Well, the session just ended, so I'm
Session's
kind of
over.
working on trying to, get back to my my life. But I will tell you some issues I'm working on for next year already. And I had a meeting today about one of them. Is we get these people on the sex offender database. I remember my first session in 2012. This convicted sex offender, I think he's since passed away. He was quite old. He came and said, I think there ought to be an easier way to get off the database. And I said, yeah, I'm not interested in talking to you about that. I mean, it's just not an interest. But, as I've gotten more involved in criminal justice reform and things, you need to realize, I talked to a guy recently. Some people on the database, there's no victims. So maybe they were chatting online with they thought maybe it was a minor, but it was a 34-year-old male police officer, and other people they're in college and they meet a girl at a concert and they start dating and maybe they engage in some relations and they think that she's a college student and it turns out she's a high school student, but it was consensual, but because of the age, then they're on the database at least for 10 years. And so there's a lot of my colleagues, because I chair the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, have asked me to work on, where there's not a violent act, to have a process for someone to apply, maybe a little bit earlier than under the status quo to get off the database. Because if you're on the sex registry database, your freedom, your liberty, your life is really impacted. Your neighbors, they're hiding their children from you, and I think that's warranted in some situations, but other situations like the two I described, it's like, really, because the person didn't really do anything except maybe not check the driver's license of the person that they met and who said they were in college, but they were actually in high school.
So it sounds like it's kind of a one-size-fits-all right now?
It's probably a little bit better than that, but I think we treat everyone like they raped a child, when some people did rape children and some people just, maybe made a much less an innocent mistake, not quite an innocent mistake, but a much worse decision than raping a child.
And I've logged onto that website to check my neighborhood, and I am with the mindset that everyone on there is raped the child.
Yeah. And some of them have done that,
right.
But others have not. And that's I think we need to distinguish when someone's making restitution and has paid their price to society. I think we need to distinguish between people who were violent actors and people who maybe got caught up in a bad situation.
And I think our system, for people that can get convicted of crimes and then get out of prison, we've got a lot of obstacles for them. If you get a felony, it can be hard to get housing. It can be hard to get a job.
Yeah, especially in this economy and in this for housing in this economy, it's probably easier to get a job in this economy because it's so hard to find anybody right now because the economy is so good.
Yeah, and our unemployment rate is what, 3%?
It's around 3 point something.
It's the people that don't want to work.
Well, or the people transitioning. Let's say your wife got a new job and so you had to move with her and it takes you a month or two. That's that transition. Or you hate your boss.
I work for myself too.
Yeah. Well, I know.
How did you know I hate my boss?
No, I'm just saying that 3%, we know you don't get much below 3% because of the transition.
Yeah, it can really never get below there, right?
Yeah.
Might as well be zero.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I changed jobs last month, so I'm at a new law firm.
Congratulations.
In Salt Lake,
You're with some terrific lawyers. You're with Nate Alder.
Kara Porter, Mary Corporon, Jeff Haslam.
Heather Thewett.
Heather Thewett. Yeah, you're good.
Well, Heather taught me a lesson when she was fresh out of high school.
Oh, okay.
Or fresh out of law school.
What was that?
I was in my late 30s. She was doing her first trial. And she kicked the crap out of me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yep, and I'll never let her forget it because I became a better lawyer because of it.
And a better radio host.
Well, I don't know about that. But yeah, I'm enjoying this. This is great fun.
Yeah, Heather's actually running for the Bar Commission right now. I think
I voted as soon as I could, and I voted for Heather.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I don't live in her district, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but there's some great lawyers over there, Christensen and Jones. You want
are.
to give the firm a pitch real quick?
Yeah, so I've only been there for just over three weeks and 1 day, okay. But I
still got a job.
Yeah, I've been in house for the last 7.5 years, so I didn't have any clients, so they took a little bit of a risk on me, but it's going pretty well. The first 3 weeks have been astounding, but I decided if I was going to go back to a law firm. I've been in-house as senior vice president and general counsel of a consulting company in Layton. Decided if I wanted to go in-house again or back to a law firm, I wanted to work with people that I liked. That's not always the case in law firms. And so I thought,
tough places to work.
everyone I know at this law firm I really like, and they're good attorneys. Especially the two I knew the best probably were Kara Porter and Nate Alder. And
Phil Ferguson.
Phil Ferguson's there. Yeah, he's a great guy, and I
Great
did know
guy.
him. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
What about Kelly McFarland?
I don't think Kelly's there anymore.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yep.
Yeah.
Kelly's a good lawyer too.
I haven't met Kelly, so I don't.
I've had a lot of cases with Christensen and Jensen over
Uh-huh.
the years, and I've never had a problem. We're not throwing ethical bar complaints at each other.
Yeah.
But what kind of work are you doing?
I'm doing a lot of business stuff with a little side of family law and real estate. So
Litigation or transaction?
Yeah, I do both. So I started out the first 15 years of my career. I did only litigation in Salt Lake. Last 8 years being in house, I've done almost exclusively transactional. So I'm pretty well rounded in that regard. So-
I am not well rounded in that
Yeah.
regard.
What do you
I
do?
tell people I've never written a contract in my
okay.
career. Settlement agreements, if that counts.
Well, I just get other contracts and rewrite them.
That's
I don't
what
usually start from
plagiarize,
scratch.
right?
Yeah.
But I tell people don't
legal
come
legal
to me.
plagiarizing. Yeah.
Don't come to me to write the contract, but come to me if you want to argue over what it means.
Yeah. And it's interesting you'd say that, Ted, because after 15 years of litigation, when I went in house and started kind of doing more transactional stuff, I'm like, okay, if I was in court, this is what it really, I think it helps to see the other side. Yeah. So.
Todd, remind me, who were you with in the first part of your career?
Well, I started off with a small firm called Scallion Reading,
Okay.
and they're still around, Bruce Reading, Bud Scally. But the interesting thing about that was I worked with John Swallow there for a couple of years.
Oh, is that right?
And then I moved to a firm called Perry Anderson with Doug Perry and Kevin Anderson. Kevin is Scott Anderson from Zions Bank's little brother. And then I went to Dorsey & Whitney, which is an international firm, but they have a Salt Lake office. And then I went in-house. So
Okay. And in-house, you were Little Vega Consulting Company.
yeah, it's a company. It's called LSI, or Logistics Specialties, and they're very multifaceted companies. Almost 50 years old now, almost as old as I am. And Sean Slatter's the CEO there, and they do a lot of they help companies kind of navigate the red tape of government contracts with Hill Air Force Base, Department of Air Force. Air Force and Hill Air Force Base, and they've branched out to a lot of other stuff. In fact, Sean Slatter owns Alamexo, so I did some of the legal work for their liquor licenses and things like that. So that was interesting.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I imagine you were knee-deep in the Code of Federal Regulations.
Yes, I was. And there's something called the FAR, which is the Federal Acquisition Rules, which is
Never heard of it.
oh yeah, and count yourself lucky.
Uh-huh.
So it's just it's more federal regulations,
But now you-
administrative. Yeah.
But now you traded a little bit of that for family law.
Well, yeah, I did family law before, and the thing that I don't like, I don't ever want to be bored, so contracts are a little bit boring. Family law is never boring because the facts, you kind of get this look into people's lives that it's kind of a sacred duty because you're kind of helping people through sometimes the worst chapter in their life, but it is never boring, and it's easy to kind of get on your client's side and start paddling, if you will. So
Yeah,
I do enjoy that, and being at working with Mary Corporon on those issues where they're I'll be honest with you, we're not cheap, so we're usually dealing with kind of what I would call high end divorces. So
And then you're into maybe business evaluations.
not evaluations, but just your general business needs, breach of contract, draft of contract, leasing, breach of lease, just whatever, NDAs, non-competes, just whatever business needs.
Okay.
So
Sometimes I like to think on the real complicated ones. If a husband-wife owns a big business and you've got to divide up the business.
yeah. And so the funny thing to me is how closely related business law and divorce law is, because a lot of businesses, you'll have partners that want to separate, or you'll have a divorced couple that own a business together. It's kind of the same thing, just on different sides of the room.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with emotions and, okay, well, this doesn't really make sense, but let's look at this. Anyway, it's amazing the similarities.
And then I would imagine you've got the opportunity to come up with some creative solutions for people.
Yeah, and especially in family law, it's always better, I think, to go to kind of have a mediated settlement than to have the judge say, I'm going to do this, because and most cases, as they'll settle before trial, but not all of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
When's the last time you tried a case?
Well, I was in court yesterday. The last time I tried a case, I did a little, mostly for friends and family, but I did a little side work. So I actually had a trial about a year and a half ago that I won.
Excellent.
So that was good.
It's always good.
Yeah.
It hurts when you lose, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I actually won a motion to dismiss on Friday. And I just had a little hearing in federal court just yesterday. So I've
Who were you before?
it was Evelyn First, who's a federal judge.
The magistrate.
The magistrate, yeah.
What type of case was that?
It was a criminal case. So I was pinch hitting for Mary Corporon. She actually does murder trials. This was not one of them, but she's one of the capital certified defense attorneys in the state. And then she also does a lot of family law. So.
That's some high pressure work.
And she was out of town, so I covered a hearing for her.
And you won?
Yes, I did. I mean, it wasn't a trial, but it was a hearing. But I went in thinking there's a lot of things that could happen here because our client right now is not in jail, and the prosecutor wanted him to go to jail until the trial, which is several months away. And I won big in that regard. So I got a little bit lucky. I'll tell you. Sometimes that's half the trick there.
You make your own luck, right?
Yeah. Well, sometimes this one it kind of dropped in my lap a little bit. But.
So we got a humble. Utah State Senator.
Honest. Try to be honest.
Honest, okay. Even better. We're heading into a commercial break. We'll be right back with our fifth segment, Utah State Senator Todd Weiler. Welcome back to Talk with Ted. I'm sorry about the dead air there. We got chatting amongst ourselves. Lost track of what was playing on the radio.
Stuff, yeah.
But I've got with me in the studio Utah State Senator Todd Weiler, and a little pitch for upcoming shows. I bumped into attorney Scott Williams today, and we're going to have defense lawyer Scott Williams on. Scott represented John Swallow, the attorney general that was charged with accepting illegal gifts and campaign donations,
and exonerated,
and won that case. And so I hope to have Scott on, and we'll also have, after the NBA season ends, we're going to have assistant coach of the Indiana Pacers and my mentor growing up, Billy Banos. So we'll be talking NBA. And if the Pacers don't make it to the finals, hopefully I could get him on during the finals so we could get some insights from an NBA coach. But back to Todd Weiler. Is it okay if I call you Todd?
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Senator.
Yeah, Todd is fine. I prefer Todd.
Excellent. Todd, what does it take to run for office? And, well, let me start this. Is this Utah State Senator, is that your first political position?
No, I was on a city council in Woods Cross where I live. I've lived in the same house for 23 years now, 22 years. So I was on the city council from 99 to 03, and then I became Davis County Republican Party chair in 03 to 07. I became state party Republican Party vice chair from 07 to 09. And then I had a little, I guess, a 3-year respite until I joined the Senate in January of 2012. But, running for office, I think it depends, A, who you are, and B, where you are. And I say that because, if you're a Democrat in Davis County, you can raise all the money you want and knock all the doors you want. You're not going to
get elected.
Yeah. And this cycle, if you're a Republican in Salt Lake County, it's the same deal. I mean, Brian Zender, who replaced Brian Shiwazawa for the last 11 months of his, or 12 months of his tenure, or maybe even 13 or 14 months, but he went out and knocked personally over 9,000 doors in the Holiday Cottonwood Heights area and lost to Kathleen Reeby. Now, she's a great candidate, and she worked hard too. But I told Brian, I've never seen an incumbent legislator work as hard as he had and spent a lot of his own money. He's a doctor and lose. But because of the kind of the Prop 2 and the Salt Lake County, kind of the anti-Trump sentiment in that district, he just didn't have a chance. He didn't know that until it was too late, but he just didn't have a chance. So I really think it depends on, again, are you are you kind of situated with the majority in your district that you're running for? I mean, Ben McAdams is a friend of mine, and we worked at the same law firm together 10 years ago.
And he's now our
one of our congressmen,
United States Congress.
Yeah, U.S. congressman. But, I think he would love to have run for governor or Senate, but he recognized, and he's told me several times, he knew, at least the political climate when we were talking. He said, you can't win. And in fact, he pointed out an interesting thing. Right after Michael Weinholz ran for governor as a Democrat against Gary Herbert a couple of years ago, was the same election cycle. I think this was 2016 when Mike Lee was running against Misty Snow. And so if you look at those two candidates,
Mike Lee, Republican,
Yeah.
Misty Snow, Democrat.
yeah, Democrat and transgender woman. And Misty Snow basically is a cashier bagger at Harmon's and lives in her mom's basement. Michael Weinholz built CHG, this huge company, sold it for millions of dollars, multimillionaire. So these two very different candidates. They both got within 2 or 3 percentages of each other, okay, on the final election. So I think Weinholz ended up with like 29 or 30%, and Misty ended up with, within 2 percentage of that. And the thing is Michael Weinholz spent $3 million of his own money and was a businessman. I mean, really well qualified, guy. And Misty Snow, lives in her mom's basement, and bless her heart, but ran a good campaign. She did very well in her debate, I thought, against Mike Lee. And you could say, well, Mike Lee and Gary Herbert are very different, but Ben's point to me, and I think it's a valid point,
You
is
said Gary Herbert.
yeah. So Mike Weinholz ran against Gary Herbert.
Okay. You said Mike Lee. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So So what I mean is, you could say they're not the same. They're both statewide races, but you could say, well, maybe, Michael Weinholz did better or worse against Gary Herbert because he's not running against Mike Lee, or vice versa. Because, every politician has their own supporters and their own opponents. But anyway, his point was very valid, and that is, it seems like in statewide elections, Democrats top out around 30%. Maybe 32%, maybe 28%. But his point was Mike Weinholz was a very good experience and had a lot of his own money, and still could only get 2 or 3% more than Misty Snow. Yeah.
Now, the demographics here in Utah, the population sort of resides, the liberal population and the conservative population. They don't necessarily live in the same locations in the state.
I think the majority. So you've got the Salt Lake City, downtown Salt Lake City area, a little bit in the East Bench. Then you've got Park City, you've got Moab. But
those are the liberal hotspots.
Yeah, those are the liberal hotspots where they kind of have the majority. But don't kid yourself. There are liberals in every neighborhood, in every precinct, but they're just outnumbered, so they stay quiet. But I went to an event in Salt Lake City, and I made a joint appearance with Jim DeBacchus, and my neighbors 3 doors down from me were there, and they were fawning all over Jim. They could care less about me.
Is that right?
Yeah. But, so, I mean, and I live in a fairly conservative area of Davis County, but so don't, there's, even in the most liberal districts, there's 25 to 30% conservatives, and vice versa.
And it's changing.
It is changing. And what every Republican should be worried about is our college kids, our millennials. They're not conservative. I mean, the vast majority of them are not conservative. And maybe that'll change as they get older. But I was just talking to Derek Brown last week. He's running for state party Republican chair. And he's been teaching at BYU for a while. And he said, even at BYU, he said, these kids, they're liberal. They're not conservative.
Not the old BYU?
Yeah, not your grandfather's BYU.
Now, you went to BYU.
I did. I went for undergraduate and got a degree in business management. And I went, again, I took 3 years off, and then I went to law school and got a law degree there at the
It's a great school.
J. Reuben Clark Law School. Yeah, it is. It really is.
Great school.
Yeah.
The Notre Dame of Utah.
Yes, in every respect.
Yeah, including the connections.
Yeah. And sometimes even the football team. So, but not recently.
Not recently.
Yeah.
Was it pretty good back when you were there?
Yeah.
You were there in Lavelle Edwards.
I was there under Ty Detmer, and it was a good time.
Cool.
It was my undergraduate. Yeah.
Awesome. I've got an issue with the Utah BYU football game, the Holy War.
Okay.
Just that it's too nasty.
Yeah, I think it's gotten a little bit better after they took that 2-year hiatus.
Yeah, I think so too.
And also now that they're not in the same conference, I don't think there's as much at stake.
Yep.
So I think it's gotten a little bit better than it was 5 or 10 years ago.
I just hate to see that awful bad behavior and bad blood between the two of them.
I do too. Actually, I do too.
Yeah, it's a football game. Should be fun.
I think it probably, like Max Hall, that kind of, when he made those statements, and I don't mean to blame him. I mean, I don't want to pile on Max.
Well, and even after Max then suffered from a prescription pill problem.
Yeah. Yeah,
and was
some shoplifting.
And shoplifting.
Yeah.
It was subject to some more ridicule years after his playing days.
Yeah, and that was in Arizona. But the shoplifting was related to his I think his drug addiction. So.
Yeah, hopefully he's doing better now.
I think he is. I think he is.
Yeah, but he hasn't been in the news, so that's
no,
good.
that's probably a good thing for him. So.
Hey, what does it take? Well, you said you started as town council, or was it
city council?
City
Woods
council.
Cross City Council. Yeah.
What's it like to run for city council versus Utah State Senate?
You know, it's just it's kind of the same thing, but it's on a micro level. So I went out and I knocked every door in Woods Cross City, some of them twice. You know, it's a nonpartisan. All the city council races in Utah are nonpartisan, so you don't run as a Republican or Democrat.
Okay.
But you kind of got to, you know, I think the challenge for everyone in politics, especially when you're running the first time, you have to show people you're legitimate. So on the big races, you do that by raising a lot of money. So right now, like all these Democrats that are vying to run against Trump, you know, I think they're lining up to see who's going to lose to Trump. I really do. I think Trump will get reelected. Even though I'm not the biggest Trump guy in the world, I think he's on a path to get reelected. But right now, to show that they're viable, it's all about fundraising. So Beto O'Rourke had, you know, he's doing really well in the fundraising. You don't have to raise as much money on a city council race or even a state legislative race, especially if you can self-finance. But you have to show you're legitimate. So even some people like Superdell, you know,
I remember when he ran.
And Merrill Cook, even some people that can self-finance and have some money, they may not come across as real legitimate. So I think that the test for a first-time run is to show your constituents you are a legitimate candidate. You can do that with endorsements. You can do that by giving a good speech. You can do that with your appearance. You know, I have a very beautiful wife, so even though people aren't impressed
You're not
with
a
me,
bad-looking guy yourself.
well, if people aren't impressed with me, they'll be more impressed with my wife, and I've always used that in my campaigns. But you have to show somehow that you're legit.
And where did you grow up?
I actually grew up in Illinois. I came out to BYU when I was 17. So
okay.
I
So
tell
you
people
didn't grow up in Davis County.
I did not grow up. You know, no. In fact, I didn't move to Davis County until '97, and I was elected to city council in '99. So I'd only been there 2 years.
My grandfather was the mayor of my hometown.
Oh,
back
really?
In Goshen, New York, in the 50s.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
But my political career ended when I moved away from there.
Well, and that's interesting. But, you know, I tell people I grew up where my parents chose to live. But once I became, even before I was an adult, I chose to live in Utah. I came out to BYU as a 17-year-old. I graduated high school when I was early and came out to BYU and been in Utah I served a mission, and my wife and I lived in L.A. for 2 years. But other than that, we've been in Utah and raised our kids here. So
Where'd you serve your mission?
Frankfurt, Germany, West Germany at the time.
And do you speak German?
I do. Jawohl.
And are you fluent?
I'm bisschen. You know, I was in Berlin 3.5 years ago, and I could get around. So
What years were you there?
86 to 88.
Before the wall fell?
Before the wall fell. About a year. I left about a year before.
Oh, wow. What a fascinating time to see it.
Yeah, it was. It was a fascinating time. Yeah.
Yeah. I got to say, I'm not LDS, but some missionaries have better callings than others. That sounds like a pretty good one.
I enjoyed it. It was hard. I mean, the cultural shock and the language shock, it was hard. But in fact, I've had two sons serve mission. One went to Phoenix, and the second one went to South Africa, you know. And my third one's putting in his papers next month, so we'll see where he goes.
South Africa's got to be cool.
Yeah, he really enjoyed it. But, you know, again, you struggle with the language because
it can be a bit of a dangerous place, too.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, anyone with a little bit of money lives in a gated community.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And you know, he also, his favorite part was there's two countries, Swaziland and Lesotho, that are like islands within South Africa. So he was in Lesotho for several months and really liked that. So he's not in South Africa, but it's surrounded by South Africa.
Now, is he done?
Yeah. Oh no, he's been home for almost 2 years.
Have you been there? I know you wouldn't have been there.
No, I was going to go pick him up, and he said don't. But he wants to go back. They're dedicating a temple there. Sometime this fall or next winter, and he wants to go back for that.
Oh, very cool.
But he's married now, so I think it'll be him and his wife now.
Okay,
so.
You're not invited?
Well, I could go, but it's a lot of money, so I don't have that emotional connection with South Africa like he does. So,
now I saw you up at the state senate about a year ago.
Okay.
Logan Blight, the Boy Scout,
okay,
was awarded senator for the day. Do you remember that?
Yeah, vaguely.
And it was Senator Jim DeBacchus who had organized that. But that was a lovely ceremony. And does that kind of thing take place regularly?
So I think that was something DeBacchus arranged, but we do bring up people. We do have the ability to bring up people and honor them, give them citations. That one was the only time I've seen that happen. But
it was lovely.
Yeah. So, you know, this kid, you might have heard, this West High School kid that came across this car crash and revived, gave CPR to this attorney named David Carlson and saved his life. We brought him into the Senate just a couple of days later, and we
cool.
we honored him. So we routinely bring people. We bring spouses of fallen officers, and so we do a lot of that, what I call side stuff, just to kind of honor our constituents and whatnot.
Now, one of the side things you did, I saw a newspaper article about the state lizard.
Yes, well,
right?
that was the Gila monster. Yeah,
Gila monster.
Yeah, Gila, but pronounced Gila.
Gila.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, there was a 7th grade class in St. George area, and their teacher gave them an assignment, so they did the research, and they decided that the Gila monster should be our state reptile. We don't have a state reptile. So they contacted their legislators. I know it was Don Ibsen in the Senate, I think Lowry Snow in the House. And they ran this resolution to name the Gila monster our state reptile. And these kids were emailing me throughout the session, and all the other legislators. And it was great. It was really kind of fun.
So you didn't vote against it?
I spoke in favor of it, and I voted for it. So.
I'm just teasing.
Yeah. The Gila monster, they're only found in a small part of Utah, but it's down by St. George.
Okay.
But they're incredible. Their blood is used for cancer research, and I learned a lot about the Gila monster this session. Who knew?
Amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. Tell me, what are I want to talk just a little bit about raising money, because I think it's an interesting system that we have here, where the politicians, there's rules on raising money, and then, of course, you can't use that receipt of money to have any influence on what you do, and I think that it can kind of set people up for conflicts or an appearance of a conflict.
Yeah.
Describe a little bit of your experience in the money raising realm to run for office and your feelings about the system.
First of all, I'll tell you, it's a lot, as a legislator, it's a lot easier to raise money after you win than before you win.
Sure.
Because people are really hesitant to donate against like a sitting incumbent. So it's really hard. But so raising money, you raise money from yourself. It's like, what can you donate? That's the self-financing, which is sometimes the most important part.
Are there any limits on that?
No. Not in Utah, not for Utah state races, and not anywhere, because it's the courts have said it's a First Amendment issue.
Okay.
And then family and friends is usually your next layer, and then whoever else you can. So it's always a little bit uncomfortable, especially when you're first starting, to ask someone, hey, would you give me money for my campaign? But it's important, and it's one of the ways that you show you're viable or legitimate. And if you're running for city council, I mean, literally, I spent when I was elected in 1999, I spent less than $300. I was making copies, just Xerox black and white copies. I made it.
Had your kids do the color them and stick them on people's doors?
But I went around and stuck them on the doors myself. My kids helped me a little bit, but my kids, they have their own priorities, and my political aspirations are not usually at the top of their list. But I'd knock doors if people weren't home. If they were home, I'd hand it to them. If they weren't home, I would leave it on their doorstep with a little note. But literally, I spent $300. That was a good investment, because as a city council member, it wasn't a lot of pay, but I got paid $300 a month for 48 months. So if that was a 48 to 1 return on investment. Now
you go.
That
you
was
got to
subject
work.
to taxable income, but you got to work. But for the legislature, I've spent, I think when I ran the first time, I spent about $2,000 of my own money, raised a little bit. And and you asked me off the air, but as a state legislator, we get paid about $16,000 a year.
That's it.
That's it. It's a per diem. So last year, because I'm on a lot of committees that meet during the spring and summer, I ended up about 18 or 19,000. But it's a per diem. So every day we go, we get like about $250, and then we can take the health insurance, which is also a nice benefit.
That is a nice benefit, and I'm sure you earn it.
Yeah.
We're going into another commercial. When we come back, we're going to talk about a couple of a little bit of substance.
Okay, that'd be great.
Welcome back to Talk with Ted. Final segment. It's 5:53 drive time on a rainy Tuesday afternoon here in Salt Lake City. If you're listening on the road, pay attention to the road. It's dangerous out there at drive time, right? Dangerous out there at drive time. And that slowed you down a little bit.
It did,
Todd,
yeah.
right?
I was a little bit late. Sorry about that.
Utah's getting crowded.
It sure is.
How do we scare them away?
I'm not sure. I think we just need to build bigger roads or get more people on public transit. I took Front Runner to work this morning, so.
Oh, good for you. And you're a biker.
Yeah, I'm more of a commuter biker. Yeah.
Commuter bike. Well, that's good.
Yeah, every once in a while I'll go up in the mountains with a mountain bike, but mostly I'm just riding to work and back. But it's a way to get exercise and save the air a little bit. So
yeah, that's great.
It's a win-win.
The air quality in the valley can be a problem sometimes.
It can be, yeah, especially in those winter inversions. So we're a little bit beyond that. But then we have a different problem in the summer, sometimes with the heat and the way. So I've learned a lot about air quality since as a legislator.
Yeah, what are you doing with air quality as a legislator?
Well, I'm co-chair of the Clean Air Caucus. It's a bipartisan kind of informal caucus. I've been doing that for about 5 years. Work with Patrice Arendt and Lowry Snow and others on that. So we meet. What we do, and so we'll start this in May. Every third Wednesday, the legislature has what's called an interim day or an interim session. So the evening before that, because everybody's in town usually the evening before, we have a air quality. Clean Air Caucus meeting, and the public's invited. We usually have about 20 legislators there, and sometimes about 50 people in attendance they're basically observing. And we get reports like, last November, I set this up. There's a University of Utah professor, and he's done all this research on the dust around the Great Salt Lake. And as you probably know, the Great Salt Lake has been drying up.
Right.
And so that exposes like hundreds of acres of dirt, of mud. And then the mud dries out and the wind blows and then we get this dust. And, everyone's concerned about, what about the inland port? And what about this?
And the refineries and Kennecott.
That dust is a huge component. So we got this in-depth presentation from a college PhD professor about dust and what can we do about it. And, and he's out there, measuring this stuff and getting all dirty and, it's just little stuff like that, So we have presentations every month and work on the legislation for the next year.
And I wonder if they're doing anything. The environmental engineers down at BYU are going to hopefully come up with some solution for the dust problem.
Hopefully, Arlen Pope from BYU has spoken to our caucus twice, and he's an economist down there, but he's kind of a nationwide expert on air quality. He has a fascinating presentation, talks about different like there was this black fog plume in Europe, in England, I'm sorry, in the 1950s, and like 1,200 people died within a 2-week period, and most of it was blamed to that. So he kind of looks at air quality from an economist standpoint. I've learned a lot from him, and so we're studying issues. We're looking at what we can do at the state level. Steve Handy's real involved in a lot of that work as well.
On sort of a quasi-related issue, they're talking about different methods of transportation up the canyons, up to Big and Little Cottonwood Canyon, to maybe try to reduce some of the traffic up there.
Yeah, I don't think that. So when I look at air quality, I look at what's something that can move the needle and what's something. So I think that would be a nice to have if it's just for air quality. I think there's bigger issues there. But from an air quality standpoint, of course, once you get up above a certain altitude, you're kind of above the dirty air. And a lot of people go up there when the air is bad just so they can breathe. But, that even though we have this vibrant ski community, that to me is more of a nice to have. When we talk about stuff, if we could get, I'll just give you something out that you may not have thought about. If we could get everyone the next time their water heater goes out to spend an extra 30 or 40 or 50 bucks and get a high quality tier 1 water heater in their home, if we get everybody in the state to do that in the next 10 years, that would move the needle. People don't realize how dirty their water heaters are. Just that little tank in your house. And if we get everybody to just consolidate their trips instead of on a Saturday running to the bank and then coming home, and then an hour later running to the grocery store and coming home. If you could just do all of those on one trip, little things like that actually make a big difference. If you get stopped at a train or a red light to turn off your car and turn it back on 2 or 3 minutes later, that would make a huge difference. So anyway, little things add up.
The little things do add up, and it is a significant problem.
It is.
You worry about more and more people come in here.
And I'll tell you, Ted, everyone wants to point at a boogeyman. Sometimes that's the refineries. Sometimes it's the people that drive SUVs. Sometimes it's the legislators because we don't care and we're not doing enough. We all need to point at ourselves. Because
that's a great point.
Yeah, no, because it's most of our pollution, most of the gunk you see in those February inversions is us living our lives. It's us driving our cars to work and to school, us heating our homes and our offices. That's what we're seeing. That's what's creating most of that smog. And yeah, does Kennecott put out some pollution? Yes. Do the refineries put out some? Yes. But the vast majority is us living our lives.
Yeah. Remember the Kennecott landslide a few years ago?
Yes, I remember it well.
That was amazing because they predicted that landslide. They could tell that the earth was moving, and they moved all the workers out of there. They didn't get all the equipment out of there.
No.
But then it was shut down for a period of time.
Like a year or more. I did a tour there with some other legislators just a few months before that landslide, and they showed us, they told us this land is moving. They did not know it was going to happen to that magnitude that quickly, but they showed us exactly, and they were tracking it. It moved like a couple inches, and then overnight it just moved like a couple hundred feet.
Right,
so
right.
Yeah, they were not. I can tell you because I was out there. They were not expecting that soon. So they did get caught a little bit off guard.
And I remember thinking, okay, it'll be interesting to see if there's any significant difference in the smog level.
Yes,
with the Kennecott mine not
shut down,
operating that much, and I think the answer was no.
No.
Right, it wasn't noticeable.
Not,
didn't move the needle.
No,
right.
And in fact, Kennecott, they have this pipe. What do you call it? A vent that goes up about 440 feet in the air. So when they do release their toxins, they're releasing them above, the level that we would actually breathe it in. So that's at least nice. And they shut down in the winter. So.
Now I got to say, earlier this year I was coming up over Parley Summit from Summit County, and you could see where sometimes now the pollution actually spills over up into Summit County.
Yeah.
And of course it's grown up there too, but there's now actually a bit of smog even up in Summit County.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. It's kind of spreading, but I'll tell you, Logan has an air quality issue, and it's different than the one in Salt Lake Valley. Vernal has some real air quality issues, and it's different from the ones in Logan and Salt Lake County. And we study all that. There's some really interesting science and chemistry behind them. And I'm not going to pretend like I can understand it all, or articulate it all, but very fascinating.
Now I've got the solution to the air quality problem.
A big fan.
When giant snow cannon.
That works.
If we could just blast up the moisture from the Great Salt Lake, but now that you tell me if it would empty it more and we'd have a dust problem, that may be my solution.
We have a couple options. We can move the mountains. I'm working on that.
Oh, good.
We're going to run a bill next year.
Good.
Some people have suggested, those big pumps they put in the Great Salt Lake when Norm Bangerter was governor, just raise those up about 300 feet and just blow it all out.
Blow it all out.
Yeah, blow it all out. That's one option.
Amazing the power that we need to Mother
Another
Nature
one
to
is
come through.
we just stop driving our cars and heating our homes. That would fix things pretty quickly.
Yep.
But none of those are really viable.
What about conversion to more natural gas?
That helps, but again, I mean, unless we're going to tell everybody in Utah you can't drive your car anymore, you have to go out. So, I mean, it's a drop in the ocean. But yes, it helps, but it's not going to move the needle unless we really drive people to do it. And no pun intended on driving people.
Yeah, and there'd have to be some real economic incentive to make that the most economical thing to do, where people just flocked to it.
Yeah.
For their own financial reasons.
They actually have a natural gas station in Woods Cross right at my exit, which is 5th South and Bountiful. And I've thought many times about getting one of those cars, but I've never done it. I've never pulled the trigger.
I bought a Dodge Challenger a couple of weeks ago, a gas guzzler. So I'm contributing to the problem.
So so I'm going to point at you instead of pointing at me.
I am, but I've been pointing at myself since you mentioned it, Todd. That's why I'm confessing here.
Yeah.
Let's move away from the air. I saw another thing, juvenile court and appointing of a lawyer. What are you doing there?
So just being chair of the Judiciary Committee and some assignments I got even back in 2012 from when Michael Watt was the Senate President, I've been working on this issue called indigent defense. And indigent's a big word that means poor, but basically public defenders for poor people. And as it turns out, most kids are poor because they don't have their own income. And so in 1967, which is the year I was born, maybe the year you were born, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that juveniles have the right to appointed counsel. And yet 51 years later, we've kind of ignored that in Utah. And so I finally passed a bill this year. It was Senate Bill 32 that provided funding to make sure that every child, every minor appearing in court will have an automatically appointed public defender. Now, if their parents want to hire private counsel, that's fine. But the appointment will be made, and then they can decline it. And the problem has been, and people are amazed and they don't believe me when I say it, but I'm telling you the truth. We have children right now, because my bill doesn't go into effect until this summer, 8, 9 years old, 11 years old, 12-year-olds, kids appearing in court by themselves. And their parents cannot speak for them in court because they're not members of the Utah Bar. And so they can sit there and watch, but they can't speak for them.
Right.
It's a problem.
And what is it? Were they basing the qualification of indigency on the parents' income?
Well, some of them just were just turning the other way. One of the controversial parts of my bill is, even John Huntsman Jr.'s son or Mitt Romney's or Josh Romney's kids, they would be appointed counsel under my bill, but they could decline it after consultation, or the court could issue them a bill, and at the end of it, if there's a means to pay. And the example I like to give on that: let's say your kid is at the neighbor's house, falls and breaks his nose, and they call the ambulance. You didn't give your consent. Guess who's getting the bill? You are. And this is the same thing. So some legislators will say, well, what if I don't want my kid to have an attorney? Well, too bad. Your kid has constitutional rights, the same rights that you have as an adult, and you don't get to decide if they're represented.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, but you might get the bill at the end of the day.
Okay.
So,
I think my daughter's going to stay out of trouble.
well, I hope so. I have a 16-year-old daughter now. I hope she stays out of trouble.
Mine's 11 going on.
Oh, yeah.
18.
That's a hard ages.
Hey, what about another one? I saw an article about something with respect to, again, it's going to be your role in the judiciary
Sure.
oversight, but with transgender people.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We passed a bill. So you're talking about conversion therapy or the changing
The changing.
Okay. So we passed a law. It was a part of a uniform law back in, I think, 1977 that said judges have the right to change the gender or the name on someone's birth certificate. And so everybody knows you can go to court and change your name, right?
But is it at the judge's discretion?
Well, yeah. And we've actually filled in some of the blanks for the name change. We want to make sure you're not doing it for fraudulent purposes. But everybody kind of ignored the gender change until about 10 years ago. And with all of the, the social movements and things, we now have about 60 to 80 people a year who are getting their Utah birth certificates, the gender changed. And so this is happening with really no oversight from the legislature. The executive branch will also change your driver's license if you get a passport, with a changed sex, or if you, if you come in with a changed birth certificate. So we have a judicial branch and executive branch doing it. The legislature wasn't even aware of it until I started talking about it. The reason I started talking about it, Ted, is I'm not necessarily a big LGBT activist, but I had a judge come to me, pulled me aside at a bar convention, and said, "Hey, you guys don't want us legislating from the bench, but you forced us to, because when someone comes to me with a petition to change their gender, you've given me no criteria, no factors to evaluate. You need to fix that." And so I've been trying to fix it, but you know what? It's really hard.
Hard to
it's
pass,
hard to get
or hard to define?
Hard to get. No, it's hard. It's easy to define. It's hard to get a consensus because you've got some people that say, well, nobody should be able to change their gender, and they want to take away that right. That's what Merrill Nelson's bill proposed to do. And if you want us to become North Carolina, or under the bathroom bill, or Arizona under immigration, I mean, we would be ostracized by the Fortune 500 companies and be headlines. And so that's one way to fix it, but I don't think that's viable right now. And then other people want you to, they're like, well, what if people just want to change their gender so they can go hang out in the girls' locker room or the girls' bathroom? And I don't think that that's happening a lot right now, but those kinds of fears are spread. It's really hard to get a consensus on how to do this. But while the legislature continues to sit on its hands, the executive branch and the judicial branch are doing it anyway. But there's just no guidelines. There's no consistency. So you could have two twin brothers who both want to change to twin sisters, and let's say one lives in Provo, one lives in Salt Lake. They could have identical cases. The one in Provo would likely get denied, and the one in Salt Lake would likely get granted. And that's the status quo in Utah. And as a lawmaker, I'm not really comfortable with that. Yeah. I think that we ought to have some uniformity and consistency on what the law is, rather than the luck of the draw of which judge you get.
Yeah, or which town you're going to move to before you file that petition.
Exactly.
What about, are you familiar with the Professor Amos Giora's 911 bill, the duty to call 911 in the event you see someone in crisis?
I'm very familiar with it. In fact, I met with him during the session last year. So Brian King has run that bill twice. It's never made it out of the House to the Senate. I don't think it's even made it out of the House committee. And the good professor, I mean, his parents were victims of the Holocaust. Horrible.
He was my first guest on my show Talk with Ted.
He makes a very compelling case, but I really worry about changing the law now to to make it a duty to report something like that, a duty to intervene, if you will. I worry about situations, and I told them this. I mean, if you and your wife are out to dinner and there's a gang member, beating somebody up, do you really now want to become a target by calling 911? So it sounds good on paper. I think in the execution, I have some concerns.
We're out of time, or I'd argue with you on that one a little bit. But Todd, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Pleasure. I wish you well.
Thanks.
And I hope we cross paths out there in the legal world.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on.
Great to have you. Thanks for listening, folks. Talk with Ted. I'll be back on with Mark Shurtleff on Thursday afternoon with Common Ground. And again next week, I may have attorney Scott Williams if his schedule permits. And Scott represented John Swallow as well as Elizabeth Smart's family and a number of other high-profile cases. So that should be another good one. And again, thank you, Senator Weiler. Did I get it right?
Yes, you did.
Excellent. And thanks for listening, folks.